Hello everyone. It's time to talk about all the books that I read in March. But unfortunately, I only read 4. So I feel like this year I'm really going back and forth with a short month and a long month, you know. But for some reason reading less in the months that are actually more days. So I don't know what that's about, but that is what we currently have going on. But let's talk about March. I read 4 books in March. And I think we'll start with the biggest, fattest one that is, like, to blame, partially. And that is A Clash of Kings by George R. R. Martin. This fucking thing is 900, nearly 1,000 pages. It's in the high 900s. And it's only gonna be, getting worse as I go through the series. Or at least the 3rd book is longer, and then after that I think they get shorter. Anyway, A Clash of Kings is great. I love A Clash of Kings. God, I finished this like a month ago. What happened in this book? No, let's not pretend I don't know. Okay, so this is a sequel to Game of Thrones. This is, I mean, it's a great time, right? Like, we're traveling around Westeros, terrible things are happening. It takes like 200 pages to get to a Dany chapter. It's torture. Yeah, I think that the biggest kind of thing in this book, right, as you see in the title, A Clash of Kings, this is the book where everybody and their nephew wants to be king of Westeros or part of Westeros, and they all keep kind of popping up and being like, it's me, I'm the king, and then fighting each other. And so that's a huge focus of this book, is all these different claimants to the throne, which is fun and exciting and a big mess. My personal favorite is Stannis. He's kind of a terrible person in many ways, but he's also my favorite, so like, what can we do? I mean, I guess Robb, but Robb doesn't want to be king of the, 7 kingdoms, he just wants to be king of the North. And also he's like 15, so. Stannis is probably at the ripe old age of 34 or something ridiculous, because these books are insane. That's one of my favorite things, is just like how young everybody is all the time. And you don't really think about it because in their world people grow up fast and you've accomplished a lot by the time you're in your mid-30s or whatever, and instead of just being kind of a regular adult like you are in the real world. Anyway. Stannis is a lot. So yeah, so we get new characters in this. We get to follow some characters that we haven't gotten to follow before. Theon is constantly fucking up in all of his chapters, which is just so much fun to read. I mean that very seriously. I love Theon's chapters because he's just so dumb. He's so bad at what he's trying to do. And also he's so conflicted because as much as he was taken from his family and raised as a hostage by the Starks, he also feels like connected to them. And in many ways, when he goes back to the Iron Islands, he's not getting what he expected. There's no great homecoming. Nobody gives a shit. But that means we get to meet his sister, Asha, who is the best. Okay, I'm kind of rambling, but like, this book is, I love this book. Fantastic, 5 stars. Like, I just think it's so interesting, the stuff that he wants to focus on and the stories that he wants to tell, and every character has something interesting going on. Whether they're stuck in one place or they're traveling or they're actually doing stuff. The big buildup in this book is ultimately to the Battle of the Blackwater, which is like several chapters of following different characters while all of that goes down, and it's very interesting. And just so much happens. And it's interesting because when I think of the stuff that happens in A Song of Ice and Fire, this really gets you to some of the major things already in book 2. And I think like as the story kind of widens even further, it does kind of slow down in a way. I'm hoping that Winds of Winter is finished soon. That would be absolutely fantastic, Mr. Martin, please. But I think it's like the scope, things are gonna have to kind of converge again, right? I think where we are with the books now, they're sort of maybe at their widest point, if that makes any sense. But yeah, this book is great. This book is great. This book is great. let's move on. All right, so then I listened to All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby, which is a mystery thriller type book. It's about a sheriff in a Virginia county who is suddenly kind of thrust into some pretty intense stuff when there is a school shooting, and then it turns out that the teacher who was killed was up to some seriously fucked up shit, and then there's a serial killer, and then stuff just keeps escalating. I really enjoyed it. I read Razorblade Tears by the same author a couple of years ago and liked that a lot. I think I liked this one more just because it was more to my liking of what I want to read about. Cause I feel like Razorblade Tears, it's the revenge, like it would have made a really great revenge movie, and I prefer that in a movie, if that makes sense, than in a book. In this case, I could go either way, but I love a serial killer, I love some fucked up stuff, and the main character used to be working for the FBI, so he has kind of like this secret, traumatic backstory thing that he alludes to throughout the book, and you finally find out more of the details later. And I like his relationship with religion, and his father, and his brother, and the death of their mother, and like, he was a complex character. Also, I guess I have gone an insanely long amount of time before mentioning there's a lot of stuff about race in this book, because he's black, he's a black sheriff. The population of this county has a fair number of black people, I think more white people, but it's also like there are some like insanely racist people living in this area, and that's something that he has to deal with. And like there's this whole subplot where some guys want to do a demonstration about how much they don't want Confederate statues torn down and shit. Topical. Yeah, it's a good book. It really is. I want to mention, because I've heard people describe, basically I think people who haven't read it and so they're just kind of going off the summary, the initial summary about there being a school shooting. Yes, there is, but none of the kids get killed. Like, it's not really a school shooting. It's like he shot a guy who is a teacher who was at school. So I just wanted to mention that because I feel like it shouldn't evoke the same kind of like disturbing reaction as an actual school shooting in a book, because it's not quite the same thing. So just like wanted to mention that in case somebody had heard it had a school shooting and focused on that, like, and was like, oh, I don't want to read that then. It's not really that. Like, okay. That's how it's perceived at the very beginning, but it pretty quickly veers into like, oh, he was killing this teacher specifically and that's it. And then like they find out that the teacher was involved in murdering people, and it's insane. Yeah, I really liked it. Definitely. Okay, then I read another book from my list, 2 books from my list actually. My list of 20 books. So the first one, I read Genuine Fakes by Lydia Payne. How Phony Things Teach Us About Real Stuff. This book was okay. It was very okay. I was given this for Christmas a few years ago, which is why I finally got around to reading it, because I was like, listen, it was a present. You should read it, even though I'm deeply uninterested. And like, the whole point was to talk about, God, how do I even explain this? Because it's not just about forgeries. Like, the first chapter is about some forgeries, but it veers off into a bunch of other areas. Like, there's a whole chapter about fake flavoring in foods, or artificial flavoring, I should say, in foods. There's a whole chapter about this prehistoric cave paintings that were found in this place in France, and how they built like this replica of it so that people could visit the replica as a museum. And I'm like, I don't know. I wish the whole book, maybe I'm boring, but I just wish the whole book was about forgeries and fakes, because that would be more interesting to me. But it's like more than that. And I unfortunately like only cared about maybe half of the things they talked about. You know, like, I don't know. It was not really, I guess it was just not really my thing. Also, I felt like the writing wasn't super great. Like, it was okay, but there were a couple of moments where the writing felt just more on the level of what I might expect to see on a blog than in a book. If that makes sense. There were also a few sentences that weren't really full sentences. And I just got a little lost in them, and I was like, okay, you need to try this one again, because I know what you're trying to say, but that's not what you're saying. You're missing a word or two, like. And so I was not impressed with that, because I feel like that's the kind of thing an editor should fix. I don't know, I learned some stuff, but overall it was just like not that great. I don't know. Not exciting. Okay, 4th book. We are getting through this quick, but I don't have that much to say about it. Okay, 4th book, The Perfect Girlfriend by Karen Hamilton, which was another book from my list, because I was like, I gotta have something on here that's like a thriller, that's like weird. Okay, so The Perfect Girlfriend is about this woman who is stalking her ex and trying to insinuate herself back into his life very slowly so that he will have to get together with her and they'll be together forever. She is crazy. It's interesting. Like, it's got stuff that I don't think entirely worked, like the way it sort of tries to tie in the death of her brother with some of this, like when they were kids. I'm like, I don't know, it's not working for me. Like, I don't see the connection between how she acts and the way that the brother died. I also kind of wanted it to go harder, honestly, because like she does do some really weird stuff, but I did feel like everything she did was plausible, was doable. And it was creepy, but I don't know, I guess I was just expecting it to be like a little bit more. But yeah, it was weird. Like, the whole thing is about her, she dated this guy briefly, right? Like, and it's funny too, as you read it and you realize, oh my God, they only dated for like a few months. Like, this wasn't even some big relationship. Also, but then like as you go further in the book, you realize she knows the sister of the guy, and she's known her since school and has like a whole obsession with her as well, and this whole beef with her and the way that she and her friends treated her in school. That's confusing, too many she's and hers. How the main character was treated by the sister, okay? And I kept, and also it was interesting because I feel like this is the kind of book that's kind of similar to Gone Girl, although like they're very different books, and I think Gone Girl is much better written. But this is just a very simple style, which I thought was, fine, but whatever. I think like the way in which I think it's similar to Gone Girl is I think it's sort of primed for people to read it and think that perhaps the narrating crazy woman is at all justified. And like, listen, she's not. She wasn't in Gone Girl, and she also was not a feminist. She really didn't like women. I read that book, I know what I'm talking about. In this book, she has kind of the same issue, but also like, yeah, no, she's not justified. She's obsessed with this guy and she thinks he owes her something. And this is a spoiler, but you figure out eventually, she reveals eventually that he was this young man that she had sex with at a school party, and then who just kind of never interacted with her again until she sort of got back into his life, and he does not recognize her from that until she tells him that that was me. Some years later, like the whole school thing I think was like 10 years ago at this point. They're in their late 20s, or she's in her late 20s. So yeah, it took her kind of a while to get into his life again. But basically it's like, he doesn't actually owe you anything. He doesn't owe you anything. Like, whatever. Maybe it was a little bit skeevy of him to have sex with you under the circumstances, but I mean, you're kind of required to say something in the moment. So like, you can kind of go, ooh, that wasn't great, but also that doesn't justify any of this, frankly. And the stuff she's doing, she like gets a job at, oh right, I guess I should say, a lot of the book focuses on her job as an airline stewardess. That's not what they call them anymore, who cares? She works, on planes, and she gets this job because, at this specific airline, because he is a pilot for this airline. She makes sure she's not on his planes until like later in her like plan, but still she's doing this to follow him, and she regularly breaks into his, not breaks into because she has a key. She regularly gets into his apartment. She sometimes leaves things, takes things. She like puts an app on his phone so that she can see all of the texts and calls and stuff that he does. She also internet stalks the sister. She starts having an affair with the sister's fiance for a while. And then I guess, yeah, okay, and this is also a spoiler, so I'm gonna talk about something that happens at the end. She kills his girlfriend. So there's this whole thing where they get married in Vegas while he is under the influence of alcohol and Rohypnol. So he doesn't even remember it. But then she's like, we got married and you definitely agreed to it and stuff. And then she just drags her feet on any kind of divorce process. But they eventually are separated somewhat, just not fully divorced. And he starts dating this woman. So I thought that the thing with his girlfriend, I wish that there had been more of her. Like, I wish that I could have felt like his relationship with that girlfriend was longer, I guess, and mattered more. But they really must have only been together for a very short period of time. And then main character girl kills that girlfriend by pushing her off of a balcony when nobody is around, and it can kind of look like an accident because she follows them on this like skiing vacation to Utah or whatever. Also, they're British. This doesn't matter. I'm just mentioning it. And unhinged. So that was kind of the craziest thing that happened. But I always just wanted it to go like a little further, like, because eventually she decides she hates the guy and wants to ruin his life. But she's sort of forcing him to continue being married to him, and it's like, it's wild. It's wild. So yeah, it does feel kind of like a not as good knockoff Gone Girl with a different plot, so maybe that's not fair, but I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was that great, but I enjoyed it. So, you know, points to it for that, I guess. I always kind of have a white whale, I guess, in terms of the ultimate thriller that I want to read, which would be, I want to read something where the bad guy is a woman, the victim is a man, and he doesn't deserve it. Like, I have found things where that's kind of the case, but I want more. I want more. So anyway, that's the kind of recommendation I'm looking for. If anybody ever watches this and hears this, because I'm not so much interested in revenge. I want to read about men having bad things happening to them that they didn't deserve. I don't know why, but there you go. The Perfect Girlfriend. Yeah, so it's kind of a funny thing because also the author is an airline stewardess, so, or hostess, I guess maybe that's the more newer term. I don't know. But, so she clearly knows a lot about how that job is done. And there's a lot of bits where the character has, you know, she's on all of these like international long haul flights. So she's like spending a day in Singapore or stuff like that. And so it's like, whoo, interesting. Yeah, so, I mean, that's it. Didn't get a lot of reading done. The main culprit, honestly, was a combination of this being a long-ass motherfucker, and then I read another quite long book at the end of the month that I did not manage to finish in time for March wrap up. So yeah, that one really took me like 2 weeks to read, and most of that was in March, but you'll hear about that. Shit. You'll hear about that next month. So I'll see you then.